Well, our hosts have the honor of concluding session of these prayers of Lord Brahma. And I'm sure you know the context. I'll just review quickly. The context is Brahma has visited Vrindavan during the pastimes of Krishna, which occur in Vrindavan once in a day of Brahma. He appears to pay his respects to Krishna. And when he comes, he sees several things that are very astonishing. He sees the small boys, 4-year-old boys playing, and so many boys and so many calves following them. Very playful mood. In that playful mood, they come across the Aghasura demon, giant serpent, 8 miles long serpent, big body. And it's on, but yet the volume is down. Just turn the volume up. Too many dials and gadgets. So, the cowherd boys and the calves enter the mouth of Aghasura. Krishna becomes astonished. It's a very beautiful moment where even Krishna is astonished by his own Yogamaya potency, which is very astonishing because he is the supreme and everything happens by his Ichcha Shakti. And he was not wanting the boys and the calves to enter the mouth of Aghasura, and they did. So his Shaktis are supposed to do everything. But instead they went inside the mouth of the Aghasura. So he was considering, my Yogamaya potency is really amazing. Yogamaya potency, was arranging expertly for Krishna to have a moment of astonishment. Because rasa involves variety, and it flows like a river. And as a wave of a river rises, another wave is subsiding, and that wave then subsides, and so on. The movements of rasa, or loving mellows, are continually rising and falling, like waves of a river. So, in the next moment, he knew exactly what to do, and he entered the mouth of Aghasura. Aghasura closed his mouth. Krishna expanded his body. Mahima, said he, so large that the boa constrictor Aghasura also expanded his body, but he couldn't expand big enough. He suffocated. His soul left the serpent body. Its soul hovered in the air until Krishna left and the soul achieved Sayuja Mukti. On the way over here, someone from China was asking a question. Are there 2 kinds of Sayuja? And the answer is yes. And it's discussed in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Mr. Super Scholar, was objecting to Vyasadev's writing of Srimad Bhagavatam in this same chapter 14, where Brahma says, one who remains faithful to you inherits the kingdom of this father. And he says, Vyasadeva says, Mukti Pade Sa Dayabak. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was objecting, saying he should have said Bhakti Pade Sa Dayabak. Because mukti implies merging. And a devotee doesn't want to merge. A devotee wants to serve. And when you're merged, there's no service. The devotee doesn't want that. So he made a mistake. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was objecting. And Lord Chaitanya said, Sarva, please explain yourself. Well, said, mukti has two kinds. One is merging with the effulgence, the Brahma Jyoti, and the other is merging with the form, sa rupya, when merges with the form of the Lord. And in this case, of the two, he says, Sayuja is merging with the form of the Lord is worse, because one is acknowledging there is a form and one wants to enter into that form instead of serve that form. That's worse than Brahma Sayuja. Anyway, that's what happened to Aghasura. He achieved liberation. And what was his qualification for achieving liberation? Well, there's two. One is in Canto 2, Chapter 7. There's a nice long list, maybe 45 different demons killed by Krishna. By name, they're mentioned. And they all achieve liberation, because anyone killed by Krishna achieves liberation. In contrast to the demons or evil people who were killed by Ram or Nrsimha, they didn't. But those killed by Krishna achieved liberation. And the second reason that's given is because Aghasura was the brother of Putana. And Putana approached even with the slightest intention to serve. She was going to be the mother and feed baby Krishna with milk from her breast, but she also had a plan to kill him. So the wicked part Krishna overlooked and gave her not just Sayuja liberation, but Krishna gave her a position of an assistant to Mother Jasoda, according to what the scriptures say. She didn't achieve another birth. She achieved directly the position of nurse in Goloka Vrindavan to assist Mother Jasoda eternally, Putana. So because Putana did a little service, her two brothers, Aghasura and Baka, they achieved liberation just by being brothers of Putana. So it works the other way too. If you become a devotee and other family members don't become devotees, they receive benefit, spiritual benefit, just by your being a devotee. And if you achieve perfection, you become a pure devotee, then so many generations this way and that way, they also achieve liberation just by your becoming a perfected soul. So you can serve your family members best by becoming dear to Krishna. You want to speak something?
This question that Krsna came to really
She had bad intention.
Krishna, whatever hurt him, then how come Krishna gave her liberation? What is
Because she rendered some service. He accepted her breast milk. She became his mother by accepting her breast milk. So their mother gets privileges. So Brahma saw that Sayuja liberation, then he saw the cowherd boy sitting having lunch, and he then became what's natural for an intelligent person. He became curious to know what's the extent of his mystic power, because I, Lord Brahma, have vast mystic power. What's the extent of the mystic power of Krishna? He's looking like a little boy, sitting here having fun and lunch with his friends. What's the extent of his mystic power? That was fine. But then what he decided to do after that wasn't fine. He challenged his mystic power against Krishna's mystic power. By his mystic power, he kidnapped all the calves and cowherd boys and put them in a cave. There's detail. And then he went back to see what Krishna is going to do. And what Krishna did was Krishna showed Brahma the very same cowherd boys and calves, but they were Krishna manifesting himself in spiritual forms of Krishna, looking like the cowherd boys and calves. He went back to the cave. They were in the cave, and he went back again, and there they were sitting there. And then he manifested, Krishna manifested, simultaneous with all those boys and calves, forms of Narayan for each one. And surrounding Lord Narayan were all of the mystic powers and all of the potencies. And how many potencies are that for Narayana without limit? And so many Narayans with so many unlimited potencies, all in personified form, worshiping Narayan. It was a big concert of prayers. And then, in a flash, poof, they just all disappeared. So Brahma could understand this was Krishna's answering my question. Everything that exists is an expansion of Krishna's potency or Krishna himself. Or Prabhupada put it this way, there's two things. There's Krishna and there's Krishnas. And there's not a third thing in the creation of the universe. So he showed there's no limit to his potencies. He fell at Krishna's feet. He fainted. He understood lots of things from that experience. Then he began offering prayers. And we've gotten up to verse 29, something like that. And there's only a handful of verses left. So that's where we are. So this is an image of Lord Brahma seated on his lotus. And here's a comment by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He's speaking about the associates of Krishna. Since he gave himself to Putana, what are you going to do for the Vrajbasis? They have given you everything. Their homes, wealth, friends, dear relations, bodies, children, their very lives and hearts. How are you going to reciprocate with them now? You are such a generous giver. You have given yourself to Putana. How then will you reciprocate with these Vrajabasis? I mean, Putana did such a small thing compared to what they're doing. So how are you going to reciprocate? Because love is a reciprocation. And its conclusion is you cannot. Or in other words, what Krishna says to the gopis is, I cannot repay you for all of your service and love. You're going to have to be content with your service and love. That is the gift that I give to you. Their own loving sentiments. And the answer, another answer is Krishna raised their level of love to the mood of pranaya. Pranaya is a nice term indicating the highest. When there's prema, there's levels of prema, and asis to the highest level of prema, called pranaya. So, in delusion, one may think, I'm a great renunciate. I have no possessions, and I have no attachments. I wander alone in the forest. I am more advanced than those householder Vrajvasis who attend their cows. And then the final verses. To address these and other misguided souls, Brahma concludes his prayers. So we're up to 36. My dear Lord Krishna, until people become your devotees, their material attachments and desires remain thieves. Their homes remain prisons, and their affectionate feelings for their family members remain foot shackles. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave a very simple definition of attachment and detachment. False detachment is things that are in relation to Hari, Hari Sambandha Vastuna, things that are in relation to Hari. If they're rejected, then that's false renunciation. And then the complete renunciation is when things are seen in relation to Krishna, and without attachment, one engages in service to Krishna with those personalities or paraphernalia or things of this world. They're engaged nicely in Krishna's service. That's the complete form of renunciation. My dear Master, although you have nothing to do with material existence, you come to this earth and imitate material life, just to expand the varieties of ecstatic enjoyment for your surrendered devotees. In other words, the surrendered devotees, they're not interested in Sayuja, we've already discussed. They're not wanting to become one with the Supreme. They want to be engaged in service to the Supreme. So his Brajavasi devotees, they have paraphernalia, household paraphernalia, cow-carrying paraphernalia, they have paraphernalia, but they're not seeing those paraphernalias and their families and everything other than in relation to Krishna, in Krishna's service. They're deeply absorbed. They're not sadhakas, they're perfected souls. And they're beyond the renunciation of the worldly renunciates. They're beyond. And Krishna comes to engage with them in loving exchanges. Exactly what their hearts are desiring, Krishna reciprocates. Loving activities together. There are people who say, I know everything about Krishna. Let them think that way. As far as I am concerned, I do not wish very much about this matter. My Lord, let me say this much. As far as your opulences are concerned, they're all beyond the reach of my mind, body, and words. Manasa, vapusho, vacho. Mind, body, and words. Now, maybe you haven't met people who say, but I have, I know all about Krishna. It was during the early days, now it's a little different, but during the early days, when we would engage in book distribution, we kind of avoided people that are from India, because there was a common, no thank you, I know all about Krishna.
Very staunch Krishna devotee. He said the same thing. He said, when I told some Indians that, come to the temple and become Krishna conscious, and they say, oh, I know everything about Krishna. And he was just laughing at that's what they said. Oh, I know everything about Krishna. I know who Krishna is. That's it. They had no other interest at all.
Yeah. Well, Brahma acknowledges, it's not only currently, long ago, people may say, there are people who say. But to know about Krishna, there's no limit to know about Krishna. And the very act of hearing more and more about Krishna, even if it's hearing the same things again, it's in the there's prayers. I'm trying to recall where those prayers are. It's like making sandalwood. When you make sandalwood, it's three things: a flat stone, a piece of wood about the size of your fist or so, and a little water. And a circular motion of rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, and it's the same action, but by the rubbing and rubbing, the sandalwood becomes paste. And as the paste comes out, it's very fragrant. It's in the wood, but it comes out. And then you apply the paste, and it's very cooling and soothing. So hearing topics about Krishna again and again is like that, even if it's the same topics. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's described that Lord Chaitanya every day would hear Srimad Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. He would go to the Jagannath temple first thing in the morning, attend Upalabhog, receive prasad from Jagannath and some articles of worship from Jagannath, sometimes his morning toothbrush and other things. And then he would take the prasad and go and visit Haridas Thakur, give the prasad to Haridas, engage in conversation with him for some time. And then he would go some distance, or a little remote, to the Tota Gopinath temple. The Tota Gopinath temple is, even today, I'm sure it was even more so then, it's remote. It's Tota, it's in like a little forested area. And the Gopinath deity is very, very beautiful. And seeing the Gopinath deity, Lord Chaitanya would dance in ecstasy of love of God. And then he would sit down and hear Gadadhar Pandit, his dear devotee, the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. It said he would hear the pastimes of Dhruva and Prahlad hundreds of times. And when he finished, Lord Chaitanya would say it again. Say it again, like, say it again. Because the sweetness of the topics of Krishna comes out by hearing it again and again. It's not something material, it's hackneyed. So many times, how many times can you hear something over and over again and you want to turn the record over? But something spiritual isn't like that. And elevated persons understand that the topic of Krishna can be heard again and again. And it's ever fresh. And very soothing and pleasing to the heart. Tushanti cha, ramanti cha, katayantas chamam nityam, tushanti cha, ramanti cha. It's nice to hear that he's saying, as far as your opulences are concerned, they are beyond the reach of my mind, body, and words. Now, hearing something that's beyond the reach of your body, mind, and words could be frustrating, but for an elevated person, it's very attractive. The pastimes of Krishna, to some extent we can understand, to some extent we can explain, still they remain incomprehensible. And that's nice. 2 more verses. My dear Krishna, I now humbly request permission to leave. Actually, you are the knower and seer of all things. Indeed, you are the Lord of all the universes. And yet I offer this one universe unto you. My dear Sri Krishna, you bestow happiness upon the lotus-like Vrishni dynasty and expand the great oceans consisting of the earth the demigods, the brahmanas, and the cows. You dispel the dense darkness of irreligion and oppose the demons who have appeared on this earth. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, as long as this universe exists, and as long as the sun shines, I will offer my obeisances unto you. Meaning, Brahma lives for the duration of the universe, as do these other, the sun shining and the universe existing. The universe, when the universe is withdrawn, Brahma is withdrawn. So he's going to, for the rest of his life, for the rest of the mountains existing and the sun shining and the everything, he'll continue offering obeisances. Namanta eva. Namanta eva. One of the key verses of all this whole set of prayers is the third verse of this chapter, where Namanta eva. We've been discussing this almost every class. Jnane prayasa udapasya namanta eva. It's the first line. Jnane prayasa means endeavor. Udapasya means throw it away, discard it. Jnane prayasa udapasya. Now most people want to know things by the power of their intellect. And using speculative powers to stretch their intellect a little further. That is recommended by Brahma. Throw it far away. And what do you do instead? Namanta eva. Offer obeisances to the personality of Godhead. Jnane prayasa udapasya namanta eva. Jivanti san mukharitam bhavadiyavartan. Means in what that namanta eva is consisting of hearing in the mood of submission and offering of obeisances. It's hearing the topics of Krishna. From whom should one hear? One should hear the topics of Krishna from Krishna's devotees, not from worldly people or speculator type people. One should hear from those who have devotion, because when devotion is the medium for expressing the glories of Krishna, then the potencies of the glories of Krishna become appreciable or tasted. And in that verse, that's the verse where mukti pade sodayabha. One continues like that with faith, tanavan manobhir, similar to what's in the previous verse. Tanu means body. Van, or vak, means speech. And mana, dedicating their bodies, their words, and their minds to these topics. One who does that for their life. Very important verse. Brahma says, such a person inherits the kingdom of his father. It's likened, the commentary it's likened to the law where the son inherits, the eldest son inherits the property of the father. In India, it's Vedic culture. The son inherits the property of the father. All he has to do is survive the father. And when the father deceases, doesn't need to make a will, the property of the father goes to the son. The debts of the father also go to the son. And responsible sons take responsibility for the debts of their father. But the property of who is Brahma's father? Brahma's father is Garbhodaksha Vishnu. So the property of Garbhodaksha Vishnu is the kingdom of God. So it's poetically implied by dedicating oneself tanuvan manobir to the topics of Krishna heard and giving up the speculative process, just namanta eva. Same as what's said here, Bhagavan namaste, I will offer my obeisances unto you. In that mood, he wants to continue hearing topics of Krishna for the rest of his life, which is for the duration of the sun shining and the universe existing. Because when it's time for winding up the universe, Brahma is now 100 years of age, and he leaves that body of Brahma and goes on to his next situation, depending on how he's conducted his life. Same for the rest of us. Now, there's likely a better destination for Brahma than the rest of us, but it's still dependent upon how he engages himself, because there's different Brahmas in different universes at different times. So the prayers end. Surprisingly, Brahma has noticed Krishna is acknowledging his prayers, but Krishna doesn't say anything. Commonly, when there's an exchange between the Lord and his devotee, the devotee offers prayers, and then the Lord offers some benedictions, and then there's some parting. But Krishna doesn't say anything. And so why did Krishna not say anything? Well, three answers are given. He knew that Brahma knew. He knew everything that Brahma had said. And he knew that Brahma knew everything that he knew, because he imparted that knowledge to him. So in one sense, there's nothing more to be said. And a second reason was that Brahma actually had done a very bad thing. You don't kidnap children. He kidnapped all the cowherd boys. And that's a crime. So he did a bad thing. And he was expecting, Brahma was expecting, he was going to get a reaction, a punishment. So the punishment was, Krishna didn't respond. That was like the reprimand. He didn't do anything or say anything. He said nothing, which was a type of reprimand for his wrongdoing. He not only stole the calves and cowherd boys, but he interrupted Krishna's pastimes. That's bad. I mean, Putana came with the idea to kill, and Brahma came with the idea to challenge. And devotees don't challenge their master, the Lord, but he did. And so that was a reprimand. He said nothing. And the third explanation that's also given is Krishna is more interested in being with the cowherd boys than hearing wonderful prayers, glorifying him, appreciating him, honoring him. That's nice. Krishna accepted the prayers. But his eagerness was to be with the cowherd boys. So as soon as Brahma left, he went right back to completing lunch with the cowherd boys, which is another mystery. Krishna's pastimes are very deep, and with it, mysteries. Here's one of the mysteries. And I've read the commentary over this several times, and it remains mysterious. There's layers of mystery. 1 year had passed on earthly realm while Brahma was going back and forth between the cave and finding out that the cowherd boys were there, and then back to the cave, and the cowherd boys were there. So some moments of Brahma's time passed. On earth, a whole year passed, because time is relative. And during that 1 year, the cowherd boys that were Krishna were interacting with their mothers to satisfy the mother's desire to have Krishna as their son. Krishna was reciprocating with their Brijbasi desire to have Krishna as their son. So he became their son for a whole year. And then when that year was over, that's when Brahma departed. Now the scene, as you see in the painting, they're off in a secluded place because the cowherd boys are distance away by the side of the river Jamuna, because that's where they were having lunch. And that's where Krishna went back to. So here's another layer of the mystery. When the cowherd boys were in the cave for a whole year, didn't they get hungry? Didn't they get tired? And et cetera, et cetera. How did they maintain their bodily functions? And the simple answer is given that Yogamaya simultaneously withdrew their remembrance of that whole year that had passed, and they didn't get hungry. And yet, in 1 year's time, a little 4-year-old boy becoming 5 years old grows and matures physically, physiologically. And that happened by the potency of Krishna. And yet further mystery is how they got from the cave to the next thing that happened is when Krishna went back to have lunch, there they were having lunch. And the ones that he was having lunch with were the original ones that were kidnapped and put into the cave. And when Krishna returned, they said, "Oh, you're so attached to us, you can't be away for even a moment, sit down and finish lunch." And their lunch that they were finishing was the same lunch that they had 1 year before, but the food didn't become spoiled. And there was still the same everything on their little leaf plates. A big mystery. But for the purpose of Krishna's pastimes, he can achieve anything. Because for that matter, anything that exists is but a manifestation of his potencies. All there is Krishna and Krishnas, and there isn't a third thing. Same point. In other words, by manipulation, extending and withdrawing Krishna's potencies, everything happens. Certainly everything happens in his abode, in his dham. Many other pastimes have similar features, where things happen that the only explanation for those things happening is Krishna was manipulating his potencies for his pleasure, which was the pleasure of his devotees. Many such pastimes. One that's coming to mind as I'm speaking is the situation with when Nanda Maharaj was taken from the Jamuna River, when agents of Varuna thought that he was in violation of an Ekadasi principle. He was taking bath in the river Jamuna at the wrong time. So they kidnapped him. You're familiar with that pastime, right? Varuna, Nanda Maharaj was kidnapped because it was the morning of Dwadasi, and he was preparing to break the Dwadasi, the Ekadasi fast on Dwadasi morning. And it was one of those technical things where the sun hadn't come up yet, so it wasn't the next day yet, but by lunar calendar, the next day had already started. By solar calendar, it hadn't started. By lunar calendar, it had started. It was time to break the Ekadasi fast. So Nanda Maharaj was doing the right thing, and the miscalculation was the messenger of Varuna. So he kidnapped Nanda Maharaj and took him to his abode, to Varuna's abode. things happened. Krishna went to rescue his father. He went to Varuna's abode. Nanda Maharaj saw Varuna stop everything and worship Krishna with paraphernalia and their exchange. And Krishna said, I just want my father. Please allow me, I want to take him with me back to Vrindavan. So Nanda witnessed all this. When he went back to Vrindavan, he told the elders, let me tell you what happened. I saw it. The opulence of the kingdom of Varuna, unbelievable opulence. And with all that opulence, he worshipped this little boy. I saw it. Who's this little boy? Let's have an elders conference to decide who is this little boy. They discussed, and one of the positions they reached is maybe he's a form of the Lord. If he is a form of the Lord, then maybe he will be very kind and show us his eternal abode. We're curious, we want to see. So they didn't say anything to Krishna, but he knew that that was their desire, and so he showed him his abode. Krishna, little boy, took the elders to the same place where Akura saw what Akura saw when leaving Vrindavan to go to Mathura. And after entering into the river Jamuna, he lifted them up. Doesn't say exactly what that means, but he lifted them up. And as he lifted them up, they saw the kingdom of God. And they saw Krishna there being worshipped by the personified Vedas, and they saw themselves surrounding Krishna as personified Vedas were worshipping Krishna. They saw all that. And then by Yogamaya, they forgot everything. Very mysterious. But Krishna's interest is reciprocating the desires, especially of his pure devotees. And they may have different desires. They may want to see the spiritual world. Or they may want to have Krishna as their son. The calves wanted to have Krishna as the calf that they directly fed milk to, so Krishna became their calf. His happiness is their happiness. Their happiness is his happiness. It's the abode of love, and it's a very mysterious place. The laws of material nature don't apply. It's another kind of law, the law of reciprocation of loving service, which is far more satisfying than merging. In merging, the devotees consider merging Prabodhananda Saraswati, Kaivalya Narakayate, in his writing. Kaivalya, merging, is like hell. Why? No service. No service. No service. Put me in a straitjacket in a padded cell. No service. No. Service. That's the life of devotees, and it's the reciprocation of Krishna with his devotees. That's his greater happiness is having lunch with the cowherd boys than hearing all of Brahma's wonderful prayers. Now we need Brahma's wonderful prayers to understand Krishna better. But we can't understand Krishna in the way that the Brijvasis understand Krishna, because they understand him on the platform of love. It's a wonderful mystery. Very joyful. So that's the end of his prayers. Starts with verse number 1. We went through verse number 40. And then there's a whole other next section that comes in the flowing of the river of rasa in Krishna's pastimes. He goes back to complete lunch with the cowherd boys. The cowherd boys finish lunch. They go back and tell the Brijvasis what happened that day. What happened that day was Aghasura was killed, which happened 1 year before. Because they didn't even know the time had passed. 1 year had passed. And they came back saying, hey, and we want to tell you what happened today. Listen to this. How wonderful is Krishna? Very mysterious, very, very sweet pastimes. Simply fulfilling the desires of the Brijvasis. So that back to that question, how are you going to fulfill them? How are you going to reciprocate with them? It's loving exchange. An never-ending, always flowing series of loving exchanges. Precisely according to their rasa and their desire. And that's Vrindavan. When we, if the pandemic permits, we'll be taking a yatra to Vrindavan. And one of the places that we'll go is a remote place where it is said in this remote place, this is the very place where this Brahma Vimohan Lila occurred, because the tributaries of the Jamuna differed then and now. But the river Jamuna flowed by the side of this place. And there's even, you can go down and down and down and down and down, and you can see where the cave where the cowherd boys and calves were put. And then there's another place where there's, there used to be a pond, or, a water body. And there's boundary walls around that water body and little temple where Brahma is offering prayers to Krishna. Now who knows, because this was 5,000 years ago, but it's celebrated locally as that is a place. There's another place near in the downtown of today's downtown Vrindavan where Bilvamangala Thakur stayed, by the side of the place where this Brahma Vimohan Lila occurred. And it was a kind of deteriorated place. Some volunteer group of people got together and restored it, and it's now very nice. Brahma is seated in the middle of a big fountain area, and it's said this is where this pastime occurred. So whether it was here or there, the pastime is transcendently enlivening. The enlivening part primarily is this loving exchange. And hearing about, we're not there, we're not in Vrindavan in Krishna's Leela, but by hearing about Krishna's Leela according to Brahma's prayers, we'll go there. Dedication of Tanuvan Manobir to those narrations. Let's see if there's some discussion. We don't have a portable mic, right? We do? Oh. How are we doing with the sound level? Speak into the microphone and see what it sounds like. Is there sound? Try it out. Hare Krishna?
Hare Krishna.
Okay, we got to do something with the sound level. Okay, anyone would like to discuss something?
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Okay, but there may be some people remote, I don't know.
How come that we don't have any temples of Brahma?
Temples of?
Brahma temple. There is no Brahma temple.
Oh, you know the answer.
I mean, they are not that common if there is one.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
you see Ram temple, Krishna temple.
there's several answers. One of them is he's not in the Vishnu Tattva category. He's in a Jiva Tattva category. It's a post. Now, it's an important post. But there was some, and I can't remember the Puranic description, where he did something and there was some, you're not going to be worshipped kind of declaration. So he's not worshipped because of that declaration. But he's not worshipped because he's not Now, there are persons that worship devas and devis like anything, many Brahma temples, because he's not, his position is not exactly like that supply necessities. He's not one of the 33 million demigods that supply this and that and the other thing. The demigods are worshipped A and B because we're indebted to them for the kindness they extend. So there's a debt, and the indebtedness is repaid by making offerings to them. But it's also people that want something to get something. We worship somebody to get something. The material, business-mindedness. I want something, so I come to somebody that can give me that something, and I flatter them, and they give me something. Kind of idea. So that Brahma doesn't have that service. He is in charge, but he's not, one to be flattered. He's overseeing everything. And that's his, the chief person. When the demigods have a problem, they go to Brahma. When Brahma can't sort out the problem, he goes to Vishnu. He's the chief. But he's not worshipped, that's your question, for some of those reasons. And again, I can't remember what the Puranic thing is. Somebody cursed, he won't be worshipped. And he would say, that's fine. They should worship Krishna or Vishnu. Yeah, okay. It's on. You just have to, you control the volume over on this little board. I can see the light. It's on. The light's on. So just speak. Just speak. Radharman, go ahead. Yes. Yeah, but they want to be with Krishna. They wanted to go along with Krishna's path. So they're, the things that they do and do not do are under the jurisdiction. They have free will, yes, and they're under the jurisdiction of Krishna's sanction. Like being kidnapped. It was part of the plan of Krishna. So that they could be kidnapped, so Krishna could be the cowherd boys for a year. So he permitted them to be kidnapped, or didn't give them the power to prevent being kidnapped, etc. It's just part of a grand scheme of Krishna's Leela, and they have no problem with it. It's like when Krishna was in the mouth of Baka. It's said that even Balaram fainted. He's all powerful. Why is he fainting? He just smacked Baka and he's finished. But he fainted. And the other cowherd boys also fainted, unconscious. Because it was too much to bear to see Krishna in the mouth, the beak of Baka. They fainted. Now that was Yogamaya. So they could experience that ecstasy. Krishna is in danger. That they're so attached to him. So that is to say, Krishna is manipulating his potencies, and their all-powerfulness was withdrawn, and their attachment to Krishna was flashed. They fainted. So for experiencing different varieties of ecstasy. And then when Krishna came out, he made his body so hot, Baka spit him out. It was too hot. And then they came to external consciousness. Krishna is safe now. It's just loving exchange, according to Krishna's divine plan for what the Leela is going to look like. Yeah. I can hear you. Just speak. Just speak. Speak into the microphone.
spirit soul uniting into a like a super soul are the size, if I understand correctly.
Say it again. Super soul and spirit soul.
Uniting the spirit soul into the super soul.
What's that? Merging?
Yes, merging.
No, they're not merging into super soul.
So merging into the super soul.
They're not merging into super soul. No, because the soul is always. We know from Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
What happens is the individuality becomes suspended. It doesn't stop, and it doesn't become literally one with. It's in abeyance. Individuality is anesthetized. And when anesthesia wears off, the individuality resumes because the soul is eternally individual.
Yes. So, what happens to, say, Aghasura, after his death, he united into the super soul. No, he merged.
Can you do something to help the sound come out?
Actually, this is broken.
So are you able to make it work now? No. Okay, well, so we don't need that little device. Okay, so now they don't merge with the super soul or become super soul or anything like that.
Aghasura, after his death, the light went into joining Krishna. Is that correct?
Say it again.
The soul went and joined into the Krishna. Is that right?
No. Prabhupada gives this example. In sunshine, he uses, in modern science, there's this view that is light a wave or particle. Prabhupada takes the position, not to say it's discounting the wave theory, but he speaks of particles of light being particles. So when there's a particle of light that enters light, it doesn't merge with the light, it just becomes a particle of light. Similarly, that's what the merging means. The individual features are suspended, and it's a particle that enters in the company of packed up other little particles, teeming is a situation with so many particles. Like that, not just a one-to-one correlation, but it's similar to that. Similarly, merging is like that. Individually, it is eternal, never lost, never created. Merging is an artificial situation, unnatural. There's the natural, there's the unnatural. The natural is with sarup, with form.
Once you can go solution.
Speak slower. Once, what's that?
Once someone goes solution, do they come back?
Yes, according to, here's the verse, the Bhagavatam verse. Aruya Krishna param padam tada patanti yata nadmita yushmad angraya. Those who, living entities, listen to Prabhupada's recorded lectures. He discusses this hundreds of times. When the soul does achieve sayuja, it's temporary. Why? It's temporary because the intelligence of a Shuddha Buddhaya, intelligence has not become fully purified. Of a Shuddha Buddhaya. Their intelligence has not become fully purified because they have not taken full shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Because that's where intelligence is fully purified. Having not achieved that, they again fall. Because they haven't taken shelter. Param padam tada patanti yada yushmad angraya. Long time, but not permanent. Impermanence is they want activity. How long can you stay confined? The soul, being individual, has desire. So the problem is not connecting that desire to the service propensity, but withdrawing or stifling the material enjoyment propensity, anesthetizing desire. The problem is material desire. So you just negate material desire, but you haven't fulfilled the spiritual desire. The spiritual desire is not just negation. Spiritual desire is service. Patantyada. And again, they fall. Yeah. It's anesthetized. It's suspended. Yes, the tendency is never lost. They don't get it back because they didn't give it up. It's just suspended. The word that's used is susupti. Susupti means deep sleep. It's like when a good comparison is, have you ever had anesthesia? Have you? So what's the sense of passage of time under anesthesia? There's none. Time stops. The sensibility of time it's suspended. It can be hours. It can be days. And there's no sense of passage of time. It's not like when you're asleep. Susupti is different. So it's like that. It's not that their individuality is given back. Their individuality again awakens. And the individual desire again awakens. Because it's always there. It's just anesthetized. And then what to do? Recognize that desire has a proper place, not the material and not the negation of material. The proper place is in connection with the lotus feet of Krishna, in service to Krishna, in that mood. And so recognizing that the real intelligence, Vishuddha, not the avishuddha buddhi, is let me serve Krishna. And that's what our scriptures are trying to reawaken. And the obstacle is we have material desire. It's become long time contaminated and conditioned. It's like, habit, like an addiction. We're addicted to the sources of misery. That's the material life. And one gets to get rid of the addiction by anesthetizing desire. That's Buddhism or impersonalism, both. Make desire nothing. Nirvana. This Friday, I'm going to be speaking at Texas A&M and College Station. And the topic is beyond nirvana, the path of yoga. We're going to be discussing this with the college kids. Beyond nirvana, the path of yoga. Because it's beyond anesthesia. When you're healthy, what do? What's that healthy life look like? How can you practice it now to get there? That's the path of yoga is. But supposing you don't take shelter of loving service, but you want the pain to stop. You take some painkillers. Sayuja Mukti. Or Nirvana. Because that's what they do. They stop. Nirvana means, literal meaning, cessation of material activity. Or cessation of material existence. Nirvana. What do you do there? Nothing. What exists there? Nothing. Nothingness. But it's a negation of suffering because the root cause of suffering is desire. If you're a Buddhist, that's the problem. Solution, get rid of desire. When you get rid of desire, what's it called? Nirvana. What do? Nothing. You don't even exist. It's not an existence. It's a cessation of material existence without a definition of what positive spiritual existence is. That's Sayuja, or that's Nirvana. So what's the option on the menu? The option is Sanmukaritam Bhavadiya Vartan. Exactly what we're doing. Hearing topics of Krishna from Krishna or Krishna's devotees. Shukadeva Goswami, his description of this the activities of Krishna. To awaken the natural spiritual desire to be with Krishna, serving him, whatever makes him happy. Now when we hear it, it's like, yeah. And then we walk away from hearing and we start doing the conditioned thing again. Because we're conditioned. Really, the cleansing and the awakening take place by the hearing process. Something else? Yeah.
It's not related to this topic. It's related to scientific class. Last time we spoke about the opulence. That all the 6 opulences are fulfilled. So it considers God, Supreme God. So he gave an example that Brahma, Krsna, and Shiva.
Yes. Paravishta. There's a Sanskrit term that says they're completely full in these 6 opulences, whereas the other forms, they don't manifest all of them. They're still Vishnu Tattva, but they don't manifest all of them. You got it? Yes. They still have, they're just not manifesting. In their leelas, in their activities, they're not manifesting all of them. Here's a nice example. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna, they're the same. And yet it's said that Lord Chaitanya is the most munificent or magnanimous. But they're the same, so why is he more of anything? The answer is, he manifests it. Whereas Krishna makes a requirement. Surrender unto me, and I'm yours. And Lord Chaitanya doesn't require that. He goes searching for jagais and madhais, or has his agents go searching for jagais and madhais. And you please take my mercy. Krishna, so like that, they're the same. But Krishna, Lord Chaitanya manifests it superlatively or exceptionally. All right?
Sometimes it comes to mind. Solo Damodar Maharaj.
Yeah. Yes. Sridhar Swami was one of his godbrothers, not Swarup. Prabhupada had a disciple named Swarup Damodar, but it wasn't a godbrother of Prabhupada. Sridhar Swami, a godbrother. I don't know which math he's the founder of. He's the founder of one of them. I don't know the name of what he's the founder of. He had a math in Navadvip. He's a disciple of Bhakti. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had several disciples. One of them was the Sridhar Swami, who was his disciple by name. Prabhupada had a disciple named Sridhar Swami. He resided primarily in Juhu, Bombay. But I don't know you're referring to different people very casually, and I'm not sure yet who you're referring to. Okay. He resided in Navadvip, and he was in charge of one temple there.
Since he is a group of their principle, yesterday because I was talking about this, one of my friend there. So I was kind of a conversation with them. So regarding the bhakti, devotional service. So their principle, they say like how to elevate in the spiritual consciousness means associated with only associated with the Vaishnavas. And I said, okay, Prabhupada mentioned that the chanting of the names of the Lord, he said that it is part of it, but the most beneficial is that associated with the Vaishnavas. So that philosophy is very different, but still they follow Prabhupada. So since Prabhupada said you know much about that, so
No. What I heard, what I heard, I may have misheard. What I heard is, you have a friend who is a follower of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and your friend has some teachings from Sridhar Swami, from his mat in Navadvip, and some of those teachings of Sridhar Swami in his mat in Navadvip, they slightly differ. There's some emphasis difference between that of our ISKCON founder Acharya, and you want to understand how to navigate your way through that slight difference between what ISKCON and our Srila Prabhupada taught us and what Sridhar Swami taught his followers. Have I understood correctly? Okay. Without going into, because I couldn't follow what the distinction was, generally speaking, there may be some specifics, but generally speaking, it's a matter of emphasis, and it's not a big deal. Just like your friend, who has grown up with a certain understanding, yet feels himself part of ISKCON, and a follower of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So, best for him and for you to just be a strict follower of our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada, while honoring differences. It's part of maturing in Krishna Bhakti that we honor differences, while we're loyal to the person who we're in primary connection with.
this question in the ISKCON disciple course, that is in ISKCON disciple course, they mentioned that Prabhupada strictly mentioned that disciples, like Prabhupada's disciples, not to follow their godliness.
Well, okay. Yes. Yes. Now, follow is one thing, respecting is another thing. He doesn't say disrespect. Don't become, because there are, in some areas it's a difference of mood, in some areas it's more than a difference of mood. It's kind of demeaning or poo-pooing or speaking ill of something other than our way. And sometimes the followers of this path or this Swami or this Math, and they kind of look down their nose at somebody that's not doing what they're doing. And I've come across such people, and those are the people that Prabhupada said don't mix with. But when there's differences then you just honor the differences, no problem. Because the principle is the same. But when it starts getting into this arm wrestling match, my guru and my guru's teachings are better than yours, let's test. We'll do an arm wrestling match. Don't do that. There are points of emphasis. There are some critical points of emphasis that came at critical points in ISKCON's history with regard specific to Sridhar Swami. And how to continue ISKCON in our Srila Prabhupada's physical absence. There was senior men from ISKCON, GBC men, went to Sridhar Swami for his advice. And his advice was considered amongst the GBC men and felt to be, that's not consistent with our founder Acharya's advice. He favored naming a successor Acharya. Prabhupada didn't favor that. There's other details without going into history. You can read about it, and it's very sanitized in Lilamrita. And there are other points without going into too much the other points, but there's some other points that are sensitive in terms of how our founder Acharya, who had great regard for Sridhar Swami, but there are points of emphasis that are different. And personally, I've never gone into it in detail, like it seems like you want to, because you have a friend who's from that background. I've never had the desire to go into that swamp and sort out where are the differences that are acceptable, whether the differences that are unacceptable, and parse it out and lay it out clean. I've never wanted to do that. I've never done it. There are persons I know who have done it. I'm not inclined. I'd prefer just to be very respectful and be a firm follower of our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada. I want to know what Prabhupada wanted and do that, rather than people that may say something with a different emphasis, and what's the different emphasis, and how important is that different emphasis, how minor is it, how major is it. I've not invested my curiosity into that territory. It's a swamp. And it doesn't, often it doesn't smell good. It seems to me to lead to isms, groupism. And I'm not happy with groupism. I'd rather be respectful and not understand, the innuendos and points of emphasis and so on. But what I really feel uncomfortable is when people from either side start finger pointing. I back away, or I run away. But it goes on. So I advise you, don't go there.
Suddenly called me, basically whenever he met my friend actually, so he become part of this. Whenever we talk, and he talked about specific these things, Sridhar Swami, Prabhupada, also since
So if I were you, I would, with folded palms, request my friend, please let's not go there. I understand it's important to you, and therefore you want to go there. And I'm requesting you, please let's not go there. There's so many other nice things to discuss. Let's discuss the nice things, and rather things that are like, I feel it's important to you and it makes me uncomfortable. I'm requesting you, please let's not go there. unless you feel it's like really important to you. But my advice is, it gets into finger pointing. And the territory is very dangerous. Way above our heads. And easily into territory where it's, my ism is better than your ism. It smells bad. It hurts. It's very painful. Spiritually painful. Then you have to take sides. Just stay, I want to stay at Prabhupada's feet. And to find somebody else to discuss this with, because I'm not the right place to go. Yeah, let's have a friendship where it's not based upon those things. Anyway, you're you. I'm suggesting what I would do in a situation like that. You don't want to cut off the friendship, but you don't want to go into that murky territory and put your spiritual life at risk, and his, and your relationship. Just be respectful without parsing all the innuendos. Anything? Any comments? Not on this topic, of course, but anything about Lord Brahma and Krishna and Vrindavan and Brijbasis, Krishna Lila? Okay. Anything? Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. And do you have a further answer to why there's not so many others?
Shiva was Brahma. So nobody was. So there was a story like so there was like a thing. Shiva, it's related to Shiva. This is what I have. So Lord Shiva asked Brahma, okay, go and find the main depth of Shiva. So Brahma went somewhere else and Brahma told like Shiva, okay, I found where it starts, where it ends. But Brahma told the lie, Lord Shiva. So and there Lord Shiva caused Lord Brahma. And, so then that is just story of another flower.
Okay. These Puranic stories that I heard somewhere, my audition capacity gets shut off, because I would want to know which Purana has this come from. I don't need an answer right now. Okay, but I'm responding by saying, please don't tell the rest of the story, because I don't want to hear a story. I want to hear the authority from which the story comes, and you don't have, so don't tell me the story. I've been around for a few years, and I've heard many stories, and the switch goes off. Because I want to hear, what's the source? I could give examples of stories I've heard that are not at all valid. You want to hear some? Not at all valid. Okay, well here's one. Sagar made a whole video of Mahabharata, right? Yeah, and 2 episodes people grew up with, and that's the way it is because they saw it in Sagar series. 1, when Maharaj Parikshit put the snake around the Shringi's neck, then he was cursed by the sun. And so when he was cursed to die, Sagar shows he's up on this tall pole, way up in the sky, on a platform because he wants to avoid this snake. That's not true. Or when he was checking the personality of Kali, and you can take shelter wherever there's hoarding of gold. He had a gold crown, so Kali, zoom, goes into his crown. And that's why, because Kali was in his crown, why he offended Shringi. Or excuse me, Shamak Rishi. It's not, some people grew up with that. I had this situation about 10 days ago where a little boy was adamant. It was like such and such. And I was saying, well, that's not in the Bhagavatam. He said it's such and such. And how do you know such and such? I saw it in a movie. And it wasn't like he was stubborn about it. You know, you're repeating, this is what I heard from childhood. So many things we've heard from childhood. Doesn't, you know, don't place stock in you heard it from childhood. You're going to have to hit the reset button. Delete all your old, data on your hardware, on your hard drive, and reinstall new stuff that you know where it comes from. There's value in an upbringing in India where you've heard wonderful, wonderful, wonderful narrations. There's also a detriment that many of the narrations have no substance, and they're on your hard drive. So now what are you going to do? Don't place value in them. Be very careful of where's the source that you heard from. And even when asking this question of Radhamadava, like what was the explanation of why, when you went to Pushkar and saw the temple of Brahma and you were told this is the only one, what did they tell you? I've got my filter on saying, where is this one from? It's just a training. Yeah, I didn't grow up in India like you did. I didn't hear so many stories. But I grew up being very careful about where I hear from. And my faith goes to Prabhupada, and then the authorities that are accepted, standard authorities, the Goswamis. If something is there in the writings of Jiva Goswami, it's gold. And he vast writings, etc. And you're going to run into it. There's all kinds of philosophical questions. Here's one. I had this question. How long did Krishna stay in Mathura? And I was pursuing the question, but I wanted an authoritative answer. So one of the persons I know that knows a lot about Krishna's pastimes in authoritative sources is Radha Govinda Maharaj. So I asked him a question, and his answer was really short. He said, whatever Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. But I couldn't find what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. But I didn't want just like somebody said, or I heard, because there are differences. So we accept from the proper authorities. So, as much as possible, delete from your hard drive all the stories you heard. And, do reinstall on things that you know that are authoritative from the acharyas. I have an advantage. I didn't hear all that stuff. What's on my hard drive is only the stuff that it's authoritative. That's my frame of reference. I don't have to struggle with the other stuff. I hope what I'm saying to you is not hurtful. It's meant to be helpful. What do you think?
You were asking, the story of how one got another. So, that's I understand about it. You are saying specifically you have to follow the Guru Parampara, what Guru is saying. So that is there to tell you like that, because the story I got, it's not, I don't know the source from where it's.
Okay, then don't repeat it. That's my full stop. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.